Hello and welcome to That Man. That is my merchandise, and today we are looking at another light novel. That's right, it's been a hot minute since I covered a light novel on this channel. And today we are looking at Trapped in a Dating Sim. The world of Otome games is tough for mobs. I'm just going to abbreviate that to Trapped in a Dating Sim. And you know what? This one's really good.
That Man and his manga.
You know, I've never really gotten into those Otome games. It's just one of those kind of things that just bypass me. I've never really been that whole dating sim kind of game person. And I'm not gonna lie, apart from maybe Phoenix Wright, Valhalla, you know, the usual kind of more slightly actiony ones, I've never really played many visual novels. 13 Sentinels, that's another one that I recently did play. And this one was quite interesting because this series is about a young man who, after being forced to complete an Otome game for his sister, he wakes up and finds out he is transported into the dating sim. And yeah, it's one of those dating sims, Otome games, which is very much for girls. So the protagonist is a young girl who ends up with all of these cute and handsome guys, because of course. So instantly I thought that was quite interesting. I wasn't sure if it was going to be one of those, you know, BL type titles, but it actually wasn't. What I actually got was something that is rather akin to maybe titles like Konosuba. In fact, the title that I actually really got a huge impression of from this one was actually a game called The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel, a title that you guys are probably already aware that I love, and it's just because that title, much like Trapped in a Dating Sim, is about a protagonist who attends, you know, that kind of fancy school and has all of these dating options and all of these study days and what have you, but then also pilots giant mechs to fight each other. That's right, this is definitely aimed not so much at the Otome crowd, and rather the whole, well, fanboy crowd, I suppose. This is an interesting title, I'm not gonna lie. It kind of feels, like I said, Konosuba. It lampoons a lot of the things that you would expect to see in other series. And why is that? Well, our protagonist is reincarnated into this Otome world. He is a mob character. So, for those of you who don't know, a mob character is kind of just the guy in the crowd, the guy who doesn't really do anything in a series, you know, the background character. They're not going to go on a wacky adventure, they're just going to be kind of there and just doing their day-to-day life. So he is reincarnated as, well, a background character, and he soon discovers that in this world men are not treated the same as women. He is going to get married off to a random old lady who he's never met by his stepmom, who hates him. And yeah, it's one of those ones where it's kind of, yeah, you don't really have a choice on what you're doing, but you're going to have to try and pave your own way. He is a small, lesser noble, and he quickly decides to use his wits of the game and cheat his way through life. So in order to try and avoid things, he goes and finds the secret weapon, the secret mysterious weapon in the dungeon below the capital city or whatever it is, and he does that and he uses that to his advantage. So all of the stuff that the protagonist would get, he's went and grabbed it first. And I like the idea. I like the idea of somebody who knows the whole aspect of the game being able to kind of cheat their way through it. Of course, the protagonist was originally a girl. This is a guy. So what else is going to happen? Well, he starts picking fights with pretty much everybody. He's not a guy who's going to be, he's not going to let other people trounce other people, and he's going to kind of try and set things right. He realizes more or less straight away that there's somebody else pulling the strings, and it turns out that, well, somebody else has been reincarnated into this world and they're screwing up the timeline. The protagonist, well, it turns out the protagonist is just a genuinely nice girl, and as you can expect, she's poor. So in this school of nobles, rich people, she's not got a leg to stand on. Now, plot armor in the game would mean that she would become super popular just because, well, she's herself and she's genuinely a nice person. However, once a game becomes a real world, that doesn't really work. So she's kind of cast out and soon becomes firm friends with the protagonist. And I like that. I like that idea. And yeah, the protagonist soon befriends somebody else. The villainess. That's right, we have the villainess as an option as well, who is kind of like, she's getting picked on, obviously, as is in the game. The prince and everybody else would kind of turn on the villainess and kind of go with the main protagonist, who's obviously got a harem. And, of course, that happens as well. So, not wanting this villainess to kind of, well, be upset, I suppose, he challenges the prince and all of his friends to a duel, to which they laugh at him, and yeah, you can probably expect what's going to happen now, can't you? So, what I loved about this series was, like I said, it is kind of that whole male perception of, yeah, what happened if a guy got reincarnated into this world and just was a jerk? The main character he's kind, but he's also a jerk. I mean, it's kind of like, in some levels it's kind of, yeah, he's a bit too jerky, but it kind of works. It makes the character a little bit more interesting than, you know, the usual goody two-shoes protagonist who's just going to be reincarnated, be super overpowered and what have you. And I'm not going to lie, this series has a lot of perfectly flawed characters. Nearly every single character in this is flawed in some way, and that just makes this series so much better in my opinion. I really do like the aspect of having flawed characters, having to better themselves and move on. Now you have, obviously, like I said, you have the actual genuine protagonist in this series who, like I said, she's a really nice person, and much like in Konosuba, the Yun, where she was genuinely should have been the protagonist in any other series, this protagonist, everyone makes fun of her, everyone treats her like crap. And like I said, we've got the villainess who, again, she starts off a bit hot-headed, but she soon turns out to be a fun character. And we, of course, we've got the prince and his underlings, all of which are incredibly flawed characters. And that just makes this series all the more better for it. We are getting to see all of these developments, and I really like the idea of what is perfect in a game isn't necessarily perfect in the real world. For example, the prince and all that, they were more than happy to throw away everything they've got just for the protagonist. And in, obviously, this real world, that's just kind of like, why would you do that? It's like, you're so rich, why would you just do that? It doesn't make sense. And I really like that whole aspect of it. Now, I read volumes 1 and volume 2, and I'm aware there's an anime of this. Please, guys, try this series out. It is absolutely worth it. I'm more than aware of how weird that anime looks, and it looks like it's kind of be a kind of a cheap, kind of rushed job. But fingers crossed. I mean, yeah, I don't know, I just looked at it and I was just like, I wouldn't check this out off the anime alone. But please do check this one out, because it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of horrible people being horrible to each other. It's not quite as extreme as Konosuba, but it's definitely lampooning the Otome genre, and it just has a lot of great content. It was one that I finished volume 1, I was kind of like, oh, this could kind of end it, but no, there's plenty more content, and even in volume 2 it continues to be a very strong title. I'm really excited to see how this one turns out. Like I said, I read 2 volumes. I read volume 1 for the review, and then straight away I bought volume 2 and read that for this review. Please go check this one out, because it's absolutely worth it. You won't be disappointed with this one.